She didn't ask for an explanation. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just moved back. Not physically, not yet, but you felt it. And the unsettling part is, you cannot pinpoint the exact moment it happened. Most men read her distance as anger. They wait for the fight. They prepare their defense. They assume she'll eventually say something. But a woman over 40 doesn't operate on that timeline anymore. She stopped waiting for the moment to feel right a long time ago. Here's what no one tells you. By the time a woman who has lived through enough disappointment goes quiet, she is not processing. She is deciding. And the difference between those two things is everything. Because one of them still has space for you in it. And one of them has already closed the door from the inside. This is where most men make the critical mistake. They treat her silence like an invitation to explain themselves. They reach out, they justify, they reconstruct the events of what happened, as if the right words, delivered at the right time, can reverse what she has already internally concluded. But she is not waiting for your explanation. She stopped needing it. A woman in her 20s might still hold space for that conversation. She might push for resolution, demand that you talk it out, circle back 3 times to the same argument because somewhere inside her, she still believes that communication will change the outcome. She has not yet learned what disappointment accumulates into. She hasn't yet felt the weight of explaining herself to someone who was not truly listening. But a woman over 40 has had that conversation. Multiple times, with different people, in different relationships, across years of trying to be understood by someone who was not ready to understand her. She has learned, quietly and without ceremony, that explanation rarely changes behavior. And so she stopped asking for explanations. And she stopped offering them. What you're seeing, the distance, the cool tone, the way she responds but doesn't engage, isn't punishment. It's precision. She is not withholding to hurt you. She is protecting something she has finally decided is worth protecting. Her own emotional energy. And this is the part most people completely miss. There is a psychological framework worth understanding here. Emotional regulation. By the time a woman reaches 40, she has typically developed a much more sophisticated relationship with her own emotional responses. Younger women may externalize their pain through tears, arguments, repeated conversations, attempts to reconnect. This is not weakness. It is simply an earlier stage of emotional learning. Emotional regulation takes time to develop, and for many women, it develops through heartbreak. When a woman over 40 experiences disappointment, she doesn't always cry. She doesn't always argue. She doesn't always reach for her phone to process it in real time. What she does, more often than any of that, is turn inward, quietly, efficiently. She sits with what happened, measures it against what she knows about patterns, and makes an internal calculation that you are likely not even aware is taking place. That internal calculation is not about whether you're a bad person. It is not about whether the disappointment was intentional. It is about something far simpler and far more final. Whether this pattern is one she is willing to continue living inside. Because women who have reached this stage of life have almost universally lived through a version of this before. A version where they explained, where they forgave, where they gave the benefit of the doubt, and where the same pattern returned wearing a slightly different face. So when you disappoint her now, you are not just creating a moment, you are activating a memory. And she is not responding to you alone. She is responding to everything that came before you that looked exactly like this. This is where avoidant attachment begins to reveal itself, not as a personality flaw, but as a learned survival response. A woman who has been emotionally disappointed enough times develops an almost instinctive ability to create distance before the pain can reach full volume. Distance is not rejection in the traditional sense. Distance is armor that she has earned through experience. She does not go cold because she doesn't care. She goes cold because she has finally decided that she cares about herself enough to stop absorbing what hurts her without question. And here is what nobody talks about. The distance she creates has a very specific texture to it. It doesn't feel like the dramatic silence of someone who wants to be chased. It doesn't feel like a game. It feels strangely final, like a door that closes slowly but closes completely. Men often mistake this for pouting, for a phase that will pass, for something that time or a good conversation can dissolve. But that misreading is precisely what she expected. Because she has watched men misread her before. What she is actually doing in that silence is deeply intentional. She is observing. She is measuring whether you will notice the shift without being told. Whether you will come toward her with genuine awareness, not with excuses or performance, but with actual understanding. Because a woman over 40 is no longer interested in the version of connection that requires her to explain her pain in detail before it can be acknowledged. If she has to walk you through why her disappointment matters, she has already received her answer. There is also something happening beneath the surface that goes beyond strategy. Women at this stage of life often carry a deeply internalized pattern of relational recognition. The ability to identify, within a very short window, whether the dynamic in front of them matches patterns they have already survived. When you disappoint her, she doesn't just feel the specific hurt of the specific moment. Something older and heavier moves beneath that feeling. She knows this shape. She has felt this shape. And her nervous system responds accordingly, even if she herself cannot fully articulate it in the moment. This is not her being dramatic. This is not her being rigid. This is a woman whose emotional intelligence has been built through experience, and who has learned that the most valuable thing she can protect is not the relationship itself, but her own sense of self within it. The distance she chooses over explanation is not a punishment. It is a standard. A quiet, non-negotiable standard that she has stopped apologizing for. So here is the uncomfortable question. When did you actually notice the shift? Not when she told you. Not when things had clearly changed, but the first time, the quiet moment before any of this had a name. Because most men feel the shift before they acknowledge it. There is a moment where something changes in the way she responds to you, and something in you registers it, but you file it away. You tell yourself it's nothing. You tell yourself she'll come around, and in that filing away is the exact moment she was watching to see what you would do. And you chose not to do anything. Which is itself a choice she noticed. What comes next is the piece that makes the rest of it click. The deepest truth here is not about what she is doing. It is about what she has stopped needing. And those are not the same thing. A woman over 40 who chooses distance over explanation has, at some point in her life, made a decision, often unconsciously, that her emotional reality is no longer something she will spend energy fighting to have validated. She is not withholding her feelings. She is simply no longer presenting them for approval. Because she has learned, through repetition, that presenting them rarely changed anything, and that the act of presenting them often cost her more than the original disappointment did. What most men never understand is that the moment she stops explaining herself, she has reached a level of self-possession that is very difficult to reverse. She is not in that quiet place waiting for you to unlock her. She is in that quiet place because she unlocked herself, and she is deciding, very carefully, whether the person in front of her is someone worth opening that door for again. And this is the layer most people never reach. What she is ultimately protecting, beneath all of it, is the version of herself that still believes in the possibility of genuine connection. She has not become cold. She has become selective. And there is a profound difference between a woman who has closed off entirely and a woman who has simply raised her standard for what earns her openness. One is unreachable, the other is waiting, not for grand gestures or lengthy apologies, but for evidence that the pattern is different this time. The distance you feel is not the wall. The distance is the test that determines whether there is anything on the other side of it worth walking toward. Understanding this doesn't mean you can undo what happened, but it does mean you can stop misreading what her silence is actually saying. She is not asking you to chase her. She is not punishing you with absence. She is giving you the same space she has given herself, to be honest about what this is and whether it has a future. The women who go quiet at this level of life are not broken. They are done being broken by things that should have been different. And the men who reach them, really reach them, are not the ones with the best explanations. They are the ones who finally understood that explanation was never the point. But what happens inside her if she decides the distance becomes permanent? If the silence tips from selective to final? That is a different kind of emotional territory entirely. And it begins in a place most people never think to look. Have you ever felt a woman pull back and somehow known, before a single word was spoken, that something had already shifted for her? Tell me what that moment felt like in the comments.